a day before the opening of the NATO summit in The Hague. It is still unclear whether the president of Ukraine will attend, and there is also no definitive answer as to whether Donald Trump will be there. However, our TSN correspondent Yana Slesarchuk reports from the scene. The helicopter for the American president is already on standby in the Netherlands. And in fact, we will ask her about the latest news from behind the scenes of the summit, which they have tried to tailor entirely to the American president. So we can talk live. Yana, to what extent could the American strikes on Iran change the agenda? And how might this also affect the Ukrainian issue at the summit? The floor is yours.
Olia, just about half an hour ago, a very large press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte ended, and until recently he was the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. So, in fact, you could say he is hosting this summit at home. And in his speech, despite the fact that there is actually very little about Ukraine on the official agenda of this summit, this was done for Trump, so as not to irritate him, Rutte still spoke quite a lot about Ukraine against this backdrop. The main thing he said was that military aid to Ukraine is an integral part of the survival of the North Atlantic Alliance. Again, taking the opportunity while answering one of the questions, he emphasized that a year ago in Washington, the NATO member states reached a common conclusion recorded in the communique that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. And, well, in fact, he indirectly announced Zelensky's visit. In other words, he basically announced it, but not in such a way as to say definitively that President Zelensky will definitely be at the summit. Listen to how exactly he phrased it.
Rutte speaks masterpieces language.
Right now, they will provide Ukraine with more than 35 billion euros in additional security support. Thus, in a couple of months, we increased the amount from 20 billion to 35. And I think this is great news because here in The Hague, our allies will reaffirm our ongoing support for Ukraine. President Zelensky and his team will join us, and they will hold a series of meetings over the next few days.
Rutte speaks like a linguist of the language of masterpieces. Of course, given the circumstances, Mark Rutte couldn't avoid being asked about the reduced focus on Ukraine at the summit overall. And the question was phrased as, there isn't a single session dedicated to Ukraine. The heads of state are not participating in it. So, doesn't it seem like Ukrainian-Russian war is actually being pushed into the background? Now, let's listen to how the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Alliance responded to this. Rutte speaks with the linguistic mastery of a true wordsmith. No, on the contrary. Right now, we have a single meeting with all the leaders. In the past, there were meetings with the EU, with the Atlantic Forum, with Ukraine. Here, we decided to hold just one focused meeting instead of many smaller ones, where you will be able to see the president and other officials from Ukraine in various formats with the leaders over the next few days. But in the final declaration, you will find a mention of Ukraine, specifically a very important link between Ukraine and the increase in defense spending to 5%. Rutte speaks in the language of masterpieces, reaching 5%.
Just a few weeks ago, the British Analytical Centre for European Leadership published an article which in fact was notably titled as follows: Will NATO be able to maintain its strategic capabilities? And in this article, actually it was said that in fact the biggest result of this summit in the Netherlands will not be any breakthroughs, but simply that the leaders of the alliance member states will remain on the same wavelengths, will not quarrel, and will continue some joint projects when they go home. So this is the actual level of expectations for this 34th NATO summit. We are living in such a historical period when, yes, leaders gather for just one meeting that will last 2.5 hours. Yes, and it will be focused on a topic that is favorable for the American president, namely increasing expenditures. But it is precisely within these expenditures that military aid to Ukraine will be included, as you just heard from the Secretary General. We will tell you more tomorrow and the day after, actually during the days of the summit. And finally, I want to end with an interesting tidbit. Right now you can see this media center around me. Actually, it's very hard to recognize it as a garage if you don't look closely. But in fact, it is a garage. And these kinds of temporary structures surround the entire building, the whole area designated for the summit. According to the latest estimates, about 180 million euros have been spent on it in total. And if we go back to the fact that there will be only one working meeting for the leaders, which will last 2.5 hours, you can calculate that each minute of the NATO member states leaders session will cost NATO a little over 1 million euros. With that, I'll say goodbye to you for today. Solo.
Thank you, Yana. Yana Slesarchuk, TSN correspondent, was just with us live. In just a day, we expect the opening of the NATO summit in The Hague. And what to expect from this summit, we have just found out. To employ all diplomatic tools in order to raise the cost of Russian aggression. This was the call made by Ukraine's chief diplomat, Andriy Sybiha. He is participating in the meeting of the EU Foreign Affairs Council at the invitation of the EU's chief diplomat, Kaja Kallas, in Brussels. The head of Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spoke about the latest Russian attacks, called them the real response of the Russian side to all peace efforts, and emphasized it is time to use all diplomatic tools to force the aggressor country to peace. According to Andriy Sybiha, Moscow currently has no reason to sit down at the negotiating table. Therefore, sanctions, isolation, and asset freezes must be applied against it. Moreover, the head of Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasizes that given Russian aggression, Moscow cannot act as a mediator during the escalation in the Middle East, since it itself violates international law.
There can never be any kind of mediators. I've already told you clearly, this is a person who is a war maker. So we need to proceed from this. They must be forced into peace. There is the concept of peace through strength. They only understand strength. Sanctions, further isolation, confiscation, and the use of frozen assets. Now is the time for decisive action.